U.S. Marine Corps, from which I'm retired.
Okay.
New Orleans Police Department, from which I'm retired. I did contract work for the U.S. State Department for about 17 years, running and teaching anti-terrorism training courses, both here in the United States and in over a dozen countries overseas. I worked at UNO with the UNO campus police for about 2.5 years, and I did some other contract work involving security issues for some private corporations. And now I went to St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office.
Okay, so that's why Monday through Friday, yeah. So, are you originally from New Orleans or Mandeville?
Born and raised. When I went in the Marine Corps in 1965, we were living in New Orleans. When I came out, we were still living in New Orleans. And when I came off active duty the first time, I was in '69. That's when I joined the New Orleans Police Department. I moved to Metairie. My parents were still living in New Orleans. And eventually I got married. My wife and I stayed in Metairie. Actually, we moved to New Orleans, then we moved to Metairie. And then we moved to St. Tammany Parish. And while I was in the Marine Corps, the police department, I rejoined the Marine Corps. And ultimately I retired from them. And we've been living over here on the North Shore since January 1985.
So when you got out of the Marine Corps in '69, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
What made you...
The first time.
The first time, yeah. So describe what made you want to join the police force. Was it just there?
My father had always told me, if you want to get a job, get a civil service job. So that always stuck with me, and I always had an interest in police work. And I guess because being in the Marine Corps, you tend to be rather aggressive, because you have to be, and you develop a, I don't know quite how to put this, but you enjoy living on the edge. So with the police department, you kind of, every once in a while, of course, you're always living on the edge because you never know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. So I guess you could call us adrenaline junkies, okay? So I enjoyed that. I did it for 26 years, the police department, I mean. And here I am back in law enforcement again.
It just keeps calling you back in.
I just... Not necessarily the adrenaline so much, because I'm 72 years old. I know my limitations, although mentally and emotionally I'd really still like to do it, but physically I know I wouldn't be an asset. So I teach now, and I enjoy teaching. I'm assigned to the Education and Training Division. I'm a firearms instructor, so I get to do some police work, but it's mostly teaching, which I enjoy, so no more living on the edge anymore.
So when you first got in the police force, right after the Marines in '69, what were your roles to do?
When I graduated, I was assigned to the tactical unit, which eventually morphed into what's now called the SWAT unit. So I did that. I was in a SWAT unit for the first 5 years I was on the job. Then I went to the Detective Bureau for 2 years, came back to the SWAT unit for 2 years, went to the Juvenile Division for less than a year, went to the Police Academy, taught at the Police Academy for 2 years. Let's see, I went to the 8th District, which back in those days was Central City, around Canal Street, Broad Street, up in that area. The 8th District now is the French Quarter. Back then it wasn't. The French Quarter was part of the 1st District back in those days. Anyway, I worked in the 8th District, the old 8th District, which was headquarters in police headquarters on the ground floor. And eventually I got promoted to sergeant. I got transferred to the 4th district, which is over in Algiers. Then I got transferred to the detective bureau again. Then from there to the 6th district, which is the uptown area. I rejoined the Marine Corps as a reservist in 1985, and in 1991 my unit got activated for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So I went away for that, and when I came back, I got promoted to lieutenant. I came back to the 6th district, got promoted to lieutenant, went to the 4th district, and then came back to the SWAT unit for my last 3 years, and that's when I retired.
There's a lot. You really just kept going promoted. That's great. So what were some of like the major issues and crimes that you guys were tackling on, or that you saw when you first started, like 69 in the early 70s?
The main thing that we concentrated, you have to understand how the tactical unit worked at that time. Mm-hmm. New Orleans at that time was divided geographically into 8 police districts, numbered 1 through 8. And within that geographic confines of that district, you had officers assigned that handled calls for service, robberies, burglaries, lost children, dog bites, general calls for service. The tactical unit, on the other hand, wasn't assigned to any districts. We were citywide, and we wouldn't answer calls for service, because if you answer call for service, you get tied down to writing a report. The only reports we wrote were ones that we generated ourselves through an arrest. So the job of the tactical unit back in those days was to flood high crime areas of the city and just make as many arrests as you can, for legitimate things, of course. We would do bar checks, stop vehicles, stop people on the street with probable cause, of course. And the theory behind it, if you stop enough people, you stop enough cars, you go in enough bar rooms, you're gonna stumble across something. And we always did. So that was our role. And from day to day, as an example, we might come to work Monday, and we would work, let's say, the 1st and the 5th district. Tuesday, we might work the 6th and the 8th. The next day, we might work some other district. But it was always one of the districts that had a high crime rate. The 4th district, Algiers, generally back in those days didn't have much of a crime problem. The 3rd district, which was generally the lakefront area, was really kind of dead as far as calls for service and crime. So it was basically the 1st, the 2nd, the 5th, the 6th, and the 8th.
So there really wasn't no major issue, it was just whatever was out there and available. You
It was
guys
mostly stolen cars, guns, and dope.
Okay, got it. I know you were telling me earlier that you were involved in like a vice raid. Can you tell me how you got into that before we even go dive into the vice raid?
I had graduated from the academy in November 1969, and I was assigned a permanent partner who had graduated 6 months before me. His name's Lloyd Peretti. He left the department in, I think, 1980 and went with the state police. He eventually retired from state police as a lieutenant. Anyway, Lloyd and I were partnered up for the first 3 years I was on the job, but on this particular day, Lloyd was sick, he had taken off or something, and they teamed me up with another guy whose regular partner was also off or sick or on vacation, something, that particular day. That officer's name was Richard Siegel. In fact, he just passed away earlier this year. Richie and I were working the night shift, and back in those days, the tactical unit on a night shift, you worked 6 at night to 2 in the morning. I don't recall which day of the week it was, but Richie and I were on the street, and this was December. So I'd been out of the academy exactly 1 month.
So it was at 69 or 70?
This was 69.
So this was still
This was
69.
December 69. And we were riding around, and Richie got a call on the radio to call the office. So we didn't have cell phones back in those days, so you had to find a payphone. So we got a hold of a payphone. Richie made his phone call, and he was given a phone number to call. And it was a friend of his who was working in the vice squad. I think this was Pence. The kid's last name was Pence, P-E-N-S-E or P-E-N-C-E. I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Pence. And I believe that was the fella that was calling Richie. So Richie's talking on the phone. It said, I'm just hearing Richie talk. I don't hear the other part of the conversation, but when the conversation terminates, Richie gets back in the car and says, hey man, we're gonna go back up the vice squad. I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact terminologies or words he used, but he says, the vice squad is gonna conduct a raid and they need somebody in uniform, because the vice squad, they were all plain clothes. So they need uniform presence. So I said, okay. He says, there's a judge involved in this raid. So I'm stupid. I've been out of the academy a month. I don't know from anything. I said, oh, okay, you know. So we met the vice squad. Dave, I think it was Dave Pence. I think Dave was his first name. Don't hold me to that though. Anyway, we met Dave, I think it was, and some other fellas at a location that I can't recall. They filled us in on what was going to happen. The raid was going to take place at the DeVille Motel, which at the time was on Tulane Avenue, about 3 blocks off of South Carrollton Avenue. So that's where the raid was going to be. We were supposed to park, because we were in a marked unit, we were supposed to park on the other side of Tulane Avenue around the corner. And when they gave us the call on the radio, we proceed over there, which would only be about 2 blocks away. And it was at night, of course. So we go take up our position wherever it was, I don't recall. And eventually the call came in, we beelined over there, probably made it there in less than a minute. And it was some commotion going on, I think it was on the 2nd or 3rd floor. So we went up the stairwell, and there was a door open. There was some people standing on the outside of the door. The commotion was taking place on the inside, so we went in there, and they had a bunch of people. They had females, they had males, they had the vice squad officers, obviously. And there was some large fellow with white hair that was struggling with him. So, being the naive person that I was, and being an adrenaline junkie, I got involved in this. I got the guy down on the floor, face down, and I put the handcuffs on him. It turned out to be Judge Haggerty. I didn't know that at the time, you know, but even if I had, I would have done the same thing, because he was struggling with these officers. They said he was under arrest. So I just slapped the handcuffs on him. It was only later on that I found, hey, you know, it was Judge Haggerty. He put the handcuffs on. No kidding. Wow, isn't that something? I hope I don't have a case in his court anytime in the near future. You know, actually I did. But I was a minor player in that, and I'm sure he paid no attention to me, because I didn't have any problem in his court. Mm-hmm. Of course, it was shortly thereafter the Ethics Committee of the Louisiana Bar Association had him removed as a judge.
Because of this event? Oh, wow, okay. So when you were saying, like, before you entered the room, there was people outside. Who were the people outside? Just random bystanders? Or
No, it was people involved. I'm assuming some of them were vice squad officers. I'm assuming some of them were the people that were being arrested. They had male and female there as well. Who they were, I don't know. Things happen so fast, you don't have time to say, oh, hi, who are you anyway? You know?
Yeah.
I think they were like 3 or 4 females. They were
Mhm.
all prostitutes.
Yeah.
Some of the other people in there were friends of his. In fact, one of them, if memory serves me correctly, was a former assistant district attorney in Jim Garrison's office. Jim Garrison, many years after that, when he was, I think this was right before or right after he won election to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, Louisiana Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. My partner at that time was a guy by the name of Emmett Dupas, who also passed away last year. And we were riding on a day watch. This had to be the mid-1970s, my second trip back to the tactical unit. And we were in a business district of the first district. And it was raining, and my partner spotted him walking down the street in the rain. So he says, hey, you want to give Jim Garrison a ride? I said, sure. So he drove up and said, get in the car. So we gave him a ride to wherever he was going. That was really the only time I actually met him. Very brief. At least under Garrison's administration, if your case was not necessarily rock solid, if it could go one way or the other, at least they would try the case. Basically, take a roll of the dice. If they won, they won. If they lost, they lost. They weren't concerned so much with statistics. People who have come in his position after he left, and I'm talking about Harry Connick,
Yeah.
they were very conscious about statistics. So you had to, they wouldn't take a gamble on, well, you know, there's a 25% chance I might lose this case and that would look bad for my record, so we're just gonna dismiss the case. We're gonna drop it.
Yeah.
At least with Garrison in off state, you know what? We might be able to win this, let's see what happens.
Mhm.
You know, so naturally he was popular with me, you know.
Your raid that you conducted.
Oh, I didn't conduct.
No, wait, you
I
didn't conduct it.
tried
Yeah, you're right. The one that you were in on. So he got thrown off, right?
Ultimately, yeah, I can't remember the year. It was 1970 or it was 1971, but the Louisiana Bar Association, the Ethics Committee, held hearings on it, and he was ultimately found out guilty of this by Judge Braniff, if I'm not mistaken. Judge Braniff found him not guilty. It was a judge trial, not a jury trial. But because of what took place there and some other things that came to light, his association with known underworld characters and some other things, the Ethics Committee removed him from his judgeship.
Okay. Oh, and the girls, they just got arrested, like every other thing. So
Yeah.
right after, was he put into jail or he was bailed out or?
I'm sure
something
he
like
was
that?
released on his own recognizances. He
Mhm.
probably called another judge
Mhm.
who, they have something dependent upon a crime. You could call any elected official and they would call the central lockup where you booked at, and they'd say, hey, this is so-and-so, please give me a call at this number. And in central lockup, at the time, they had a card index, again, no computers, a card index of all elected officials and their phone numbers. So you verify that the person you're calling is in fact this person. And it said, this is Judge so-and-so, I want Mr. Smith released on his own recognizances or on my name, and they don't have to post a bond.
Okay.
And I'm sure that's what happened with Judge Haggerty.
And was there any other episodes that you had to deal with regarding the Vice Squad ever again, or was that your only one?
That was my sole contact with them.
So, this is just a fun question. What was like the most interesting, I guess, investigation you've ever been a part of, or anything like that?
Good grief. On my 26 years with the New Orleans Police Department, I've made probably between 2,500 and 3,500 arrests. The most interesting one out of that, good God. There were several that, for one reason or another, stuck out in my mind, but to say which one was the most memorable, I couldn't say.
Wow, there's just that many. That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
But
It was it. I had a great time there. I really did. After this episode,
Yeah.
we used to refer to him as Raggedy Haggity.
really? Because of this episode, or just because of
Yeah,
everything?
yeah, because of that.
Yeah. And so when you had to go face him again, what was it like?
I had a case in his section of court, and I can't remember which section he had. I think he had Division C, but I'm not sure. Too many years ago. It was a motion to suppress. It was a minor case, probably a drug case or a stolen car or something like that. Nothing of any really significance, not like a bank robbery or a murder or something. And I remember walking into when I got the subpoena, it had the section on it. I said, oh God, no, it's Judge Haggerty's section. And this was like, while he was still on the bench, before he got pulled off the bench, but the ethics committee. So this had to be 1970. And I said, oh God, I hope you don't remember me. So I went into his court, and I wasn't the only one. They had other police officers there that had either motions or trials scheduled for that day. And I remember them taking a bench, and you always think that they're looking directly at you, that they recognize you, but they don't recognize you. There's so many people that they run across any day of the week, and the only time I really saw him, I was looking at the back of his head, so he didn't really see me.